Good evening. We are now in an era not of global warming, but of global boiling. So says the head of the UN, as figures suggest that July is set to be the hottest month ever recorded in the world. President Biden has said that heat is the #1 weather-related killer in the US, and that no one can continue to deny the impact of climate change. In a moment, we'll be speaking to our correspondents on 3 continents across the globe, looking at the impact of rising temperatures and action that is being taken. But first, here's our climate editor, Justin Rowlatt.
There has been no let-up in the searing weather or the wildfires in parts of southern Europe and North Africa, with firefighters battling blazes in as many as 9 countries. July isn't over yet, but it is already virtually certain to be the hottest month ever recorded on Earth, say climate scientists around the world. We have entered the era of global boiling, according to the UN chief, but do not despair, he says.
The evidence is everywhere. Humanity has unleashed destruction. This must not inspire despair, but action. We can still stop the worst. But to do so, we must turn a year of burning heat into a year of burning ambition and accelerate climate action now.
Here in the UK, the Met Office has said last year's record-breaking temperatures were a taste of things to come. If carbon emissions continue as expected, by 2060, an average July in the UK will be as hot as 2022.
Month after month, these records are being broken. We're seeing extreme weather events around the world, whether they're heat events, wildfires, droughts, even flooding events linked with climate change as well. And we're going to see more of those, much more frequently, more intense, more prolonged as our climate continues to change.
Let's take a look at just how exceptional temperatures have been. The grey lines here show average day-to-day temperatures since 1940. And let's now add in this year and look how it peaks on July the 6th. That was the hottest day ever recorded, with an average global temperature of 17.18 degrees Celsius. And if you're thinking that sounds a little bit low, it's because it is global. It includes everywhere from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and day and night. And now look how July continues to be exceptionally hot. This graph gives us all the Julys since 1880, when the Industrial Revolution and carbon emissions really started to take off. And look how the temperature has steadily risen to where we are now. This, of course, is how the weather looked for most of us here in the UK this July, even if there was record heat elsewhere. It was a very different story last year, though, with that record-breaking heat wave. 57 weather stations across the country recorded all-time high temperatures. Look how widespread they are. There were records broken in all the nations of the UK. So what can be done? Well, we can plant more trees. They soak up carbon from the atmosphere, but it takes time for them to grow, and the CO2 can be released back when they die. A British startup company has developed small-scale units that can strip carbon dioxide from the air. It can then be permanently stored underground.
We can produce units anywhere because we have off-the-shelf units that we're using, and we can deploy them anywhere. And so from our perspective, that means you have the highest opportunity to actually remove the most amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Other companies, like this one in Iceland, have alternative technologies that do the same. But by far the most important thing we need to do is reduce our use of fossil fuels, and quickly. The carbon dioxide they create is the main driver of climate change. Justin Rowlatt, BBC News.
Well, the effect of global warming is being seen in extreme weather across the world. And it's caused 2 world leaders this week to declare that climate change is real and upon us. In a moment, we'll hear from our correspondents in the US and Pakistan on the impact there. But first, here's Jenny Hill in Rhodes, which has seen scorching temperatures and raging wildfires.
It's the height of the summer season here on Rhodes, and ordinarily holidaymakers would be enjoying its beaches, its natural scenery. Instead, heat waves and wildfires have brought destruction. to this island. 20,000 people were forced to flee their hotels and their homes this week, and much of southern Europe and North Africa were also badly affected. The Greek Prime Minister has warned that the climate crisis is already here and will trigger greater disasters in the Mediterranean region. Now, other extreme events have, of course, hit Europe in recent times. Just a couple of years ago, I was reporting in Germany on floods there, which claimed the lives of nearly 200 people. What's the EU doing about it? Well, it's asked member states to more than halve their greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, and the bloc aims to become climate neutral by 2050.
It's monsoon season in Pakistan, and already rural areas and cities are experiencing flooding, but nothing on the scale of what was seen last year, when an intense heat wave followed by heavy rains led to devastating floods. 33 million people were affected, crops destroyed, homes, bridges, roads, and more than 1,700 people lost their lives. There are still people displaced today because of the damage that was done then. The UN Secretary General referred to it as climate carnage. Now, Pakistan has seen intense flooding during the course of its history, and it's considered to be particularly vulnerable to climate change. In the north of the country is an area referred to as the Third Pole because it has more glacial ice than anywhere else on Earth apart from the polar regions, and some of those are melting at a rapid pace, according to the UN Development Programme. Pakistan is responsible for less than 1% of global greenhouse emissions, and its politicians have been at the forefront of arguing that wealthier countries need to pay their dues because of their heavier carbon footprint.
Here in the US Capitol today, it's been around about 36, 37 degrees C, but that is positively mild compared to other parts of the United States. In Phoenix, Arizona, they've been enjoying their 28th consecutive day with the mercury up above 43 degrees C, and it's a similar picture across much of the country. Some 150 million Americans this week are living under an official heat alert. Now, President Biden has introduced a number of measures at the White House this afternoon. They include better protection for workers, farm workers, those working in construction, so they don't have to go out and work in the heat. Also, more money for weather forecasting. But the truth is, these are measures that deal with the symptoms of climate change, not the causes. And of course, America historically has been the world's biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. It now comes just behind China. And President Biden's critics will say that faced with a Congress that has sometimes dragged its feet on introducing tougher measures, that basically he has not acted quickly or effectively enough in reducing America's greenhouse gases.
And that was John Donnison finishing those reports from around the world. The controversy over the closure of Nigel Farage's bank account at Coutts has led to a second resignation, this time of the bank's chief executive.